Welcome. This is an interesting briefing for me because I've always been interested in the financing side of things, especially folks that understand federal contracting finance. So real quick, I'll give you a quick introduction. Patrick Tom, the man from Atlanta, is in the house. He's down. He's going to be talking today. Peter Timbus with an A. That's only because I always misspell his name with a U. And I'm Dave Lowe. I'm the CEO of ISI Federal. I'm going to do double duty today. I'm going to be the Gov Brief host as well as comment on a couple of things as we're working to develop new business and using contract financing to help you win business, because that's what it's about, right? So best briefing ever if we learn how to stand taller than we are with our finances right now. Love that. Nice stuff, Malik. And Brandon says, I get contract funding source contract funding source at low interest. Gotcha. I actually leave with more answers than questions, Nancy says. Love it. Michael, a new funding source is identified. I do believe we will help you there. I can secure the appropriate financing to onboard new contract awards. Hey,
Yay.
That's perfect, Cheryl. Victor, from Victor J. Williams. I'm able to secure funding for my organization to make it suitable to win contract awards. Again, right spot on what we've been talking about today. And David from AQI, damn if I know, just here to learn. Love it. That's great. And I saw him here. So David Scott's here. Saw him pop in. So give us a quick overview of Action Capital and TFN. Who wants to take it?
Yeah, I'll start. Thanks. Appreciate that, Dave. Action Capital, TFN, we were established in 1959. So it's a mere 6 years before I was even born. Obviously not me the whole time, but extremely long track record in history. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. We're in fact in the same building we've been in since 1961, a 36-story high-rise in downtown, but we've got a national presence. We're financing people all over the United States and almost literally every state in the union. We really pioneered the federal contracting lending market. Wow. It's a specialty niche for us. We do things beyond that now, but we started in 1959, again, before I was here, but we're really the first firm focused primarily on the federal contracting lending market. And we're really filling that niche that's not served by traditional bank financing. And we'll get into that a little bit later. We pride ourselves on being really a highly flexible and responsive organization. We demonstrate that a lot of different ways. We pride ourselves, we're often able to respond and even start funding people within 2 to 3 days from first contact, which is really just astounding. And we're focused on providing working capital financing for small and medium-sized businesses, as opposed to strict term loans or equipment financing. We are one of the nation's largest independent receivables-based finance companies. We provided over $2 billion in funding last year. And our kind of the primary focus and way we go about business is, we call it in our tagline, lending to the opportunity, not based on historical financial statements, which is really different from how.
This is really different, folks. And for those of you that know me, if anybody that's out there, I've been jonesing for years to find somebody, banks or funding mechanisms that understand the federal space. And we all know if we're going after financing, that the banks look at you like you got 3 heads sometimes when you're talking about funding a contract, because they don't understand the federal space. And that's the best part about Action Capital and TFN. I met these guys at the NVSBA show, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, right, guys?
Yeah.
So pretty crazy. So lending to the opportunity. What does that mean, Peter Timbus?
Well, let me just backtrack just for a second that I've been doing this since 1991. Started out in the 8.8 arena, probably have financed in excess of 300 8.8 companies since 1991. I've probably been involved in financing 1,500 companies across the United States. The bulk of our business comes from Maryland, Virginia, and DC. We have an excellent client base. Our clients love us. I'm at the point, since I did start in 1991, I'm doing generational finance. And what I mean by that is I'm now financing the children of a few of my original 8A borrowers in the early 90s.
That would be 16A.
That's right, it's double. Rather than 8A, it's the 16A. So we have an excellent reputation. We get things done. And for those that are here that will take advantage of this webinar, there are a million consultants in the DC area. We come in, we don't charge any upfront fees, and you really have an opportunity to partner with us, someone who's real, someone who gets things done to grow your company. So getting back to the original question of lending to the opportunity, is throw your FICO scores out the window, throw bad credit out the window. I know a lot of you finance your companies when you first start with using credit cards or trying to get bank financing. You don't have the history. Doesn't make any difference to us. We're going to A, help you win that opportunity, and B, once you win that opportunity, we're going to establish our line of credit to help you perform on that contract. So when we say lending to the opportunity, we're going to look at the business that you have, lend to the business. We will look at your financial statements, but it's not lending decisions are not predicated on your financial statement.
And I think one of the
need to perform, and we're going to provide those funds to help you perform on that contract.
And I think even before that, the financial support letters, which is what we're going to get to in a few minutes, is really key on the opportunity side. Providing the financial wherewithal using a financial support letter helps them win contracts, helps companies win contracts.
It's
Real
critical.
quick, this event is not affiliated or endorsed by the SBA or any other agency. And this is a quick disclaimer so that anybody that is here from the government can communicate with us. And it's provided to you for informational purposes only. All participation is voluntary, and it's not an indication to buy from you vendors or from anybody on this call. All right, real quick, we're going to go through. We did the introductions to you for what Action Capital and TFN is all about. But we're going to get into the sources of capital, and a lot of folks are asking this question of what kind of source we're talking about. And we're going to look at the financial strength and the acquisition overview specifically on what contracting officers are looking for from you as a business and how you can get thrown out of the pool. So market, and then we'll talk a little bit about marketing your company now that you have a strong financial backing and leveraging those financial support letters that I know Peter is going to be talking about and provide you some additional resources. Real quick, participation is easy. We love it. Don't we, Sally?
We love participation.
We love participation. So if you want to
Very
participate,
interactive.
you can chat, you can raise your hand, you can do the Q&A. If you have something that's a little bit more that you don't want to release to everybody and their mother here, you can send it to tfn@actioncapital.com. Peter Timbus will be answering those questions directly. If you like the way that Peter looks, now that he's centered in the screen, we were busting on him on that earlier. Now you can make us bigger or you can make us disappear altogether. There is supporting docs that are coming right now. And the way that this is going to work, these are links. Hang on. What happens sometimes? All right. I will get those to you momentarily as soon as I can figure out how to make my stinking chat pop back up on my screen. I'll get those to you. And then we'll, while I'm doing this next poll, I'll figure that out. But this will be there for you for the handouts. And we'll also ask a question, why in the world did you decide to show up here today? And while you're answering this, I'm going to get into, and then we're going to get into the sources of capital and liquidity there, Patrick. But in the meantime, I got to find out where my chat is because it is control Alt-H. What is the Alt-H thing? Alt-H. Whoa, not yet. Alt-H. Let us know why you decided to join us today. I got no idea what happened to my chat. I'm going to have to do a couple of things here.
So Dave, my chat's showing if I could be of service.
If I could chat you something, you could be of service.
I'll chat you.
Thing.
I'll chat you something and see if you can see it.
I saw it earlier.
I just sent you a chat on the host and the other host. Send you 2 chats. There you go.
I am I'm Zoomified challenge.
You're Zoom impaired.
I'm Zoom impaired. That is a fact. I got no idea. I don't see any chat right now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to let Patrick start here. So we're not going to let anything get in the way, and we're going to end this poll. Thank you very much for that. And most have federal prime contracts as a prime. That's great news, right?
That is great.
Take a look at this. 50%, and then some have some of it as a sub, right? And some nuts sent me an email.
Works
of course,
too.
there's a couple of whys and hows. All right, there you go. So you go ahead. Oh, I found a chat. Look at that. You know where it was? Behind the poll.
And there's a couple there that said they've got they need funding on a contract, so that is good news. As David mentioned, I mean, you know, the big thing is demonstrating financial capacity and having financial capacity. And obviously, it's a huge world out there. So we're going to talk first about just, you know, what are sources of capital and liquidity that are out there generically. And from a big picture, you know, there's lots of different things. The cheapest and easiest, or not easiest, but best, is just normal trade terms, up to the most expensive being selling equity, giving away a part of your company and able to help finance and fund your business. And there's pluses and minuses to all these different instruments, and there's ways they can be used, but we just want to talk for a second about each of those and how they may fit into your life and how you can make use of them. So why don't we go into normal trade terms? I mean, the best thing about normal trade terms, it's free. You pay nothing for it, and it's a great way to fund your business. And it can be include subcontracting. So you get a new large contract award, you may have 100 positions on it, but by subcontracting out some of those positions, you're really using somebody else's capital. They're paying that payroll. And when you get paid on your invoice to the government by paying the subcontractor on a paid when paid basis, you've just gotten, you know, 60 days, maybe even longer, of free capital because you're able to still get some margin on that. Typically, normal trade terms does require some extended operating history, and you have to maintain some normal trade payment terms to it. If you start paying late or partial payments or other things, you're going to lose access to some of those free trade terms.
Or you're going to be in big trouble with a subcontractor.
That's right. To get real high limits, you will require quality financial statements. A couple attendees noted that they're subcontractors, so they're not direct. Right now, you're granting somebody free trade credit because you're carrying that payroll while you're working on that contract. We can help you on that financing as well, but that's just something to think about as you're trying to get subcontractors. They should be asking, hey, are you credit qualified? Because I'm taking risks when the government pays you that you've got the capacity to handle that payment and get it to me without having it offset and be subsumed by other operating expenses that you may have. If you don't have subcontracting, trade credit is only available to support specific vendor purchases. You know, you're buying hardware from a vendor, and in those cases, it will not support your own payroll and operating costs and taxes and rent and travel and others. So not all vendors are supported by trade terms. Specialty debt, you know, we actually missed a slide, but that's okay because it's related. It's just not in there, Dave. That's my bad, I think. Is, you know, in between specialty debt is just traditional bank debt. But the specialty debt we're talking about here is the same concept. You know, bank debt is a good thing, but it's difficult to get. A lot of smaller companies will not qualify for bank debt or not in the amounts that you need. And that's why we fit in the niche that we help fill that gap. Bank debt is going to require, you know, 2 to 3 years of operating results and positive operating results. The banks, as a general rule, do not like lending to service companies because there's no hard assets. And they do not like storied credits. They're going to require that you have positive balance sheet net worth. So equity that's greater than any intangibles or losses. They don't like high balance sheet leverage. They do prefer to have hard asset coverage, and they're going to have things like financial covenants that make sure that you are operating in a certain manner that gives you a lot of restrictions. Specialty debt is just a step above that. I'm sorry. That is essentially bank debt, but disguised to solve a specific need, like leasing or a sale leaseback, where it's a little bit more expensive than bank debt, but it's a cleverly disguised and structured form of bank debt to meet a specific need. For a lot of companies, even larger government contractors, bank debt is just not accessible in the dollar amounts you need to really win that next contract or to win the contract after that, because all these government contractors, you'll tend to grow at not 2 or 3 or 4%, but you'll grow at 25%, 40%, 50%, 100% as you get new contract awards. And banks just aren't set up to handle that.
They don't like it.
They don't like it.
And we see that happen a lot in the federal space.
That's right. They
just don't understand it.
As soon as the contract, they see that they need to double the size of their line, the bank panics and says, well, how are you going to manage that growth? And they get afraid of things like, hey, all the employees on the contract are going to go home every night. And they're afraid that what if they never come back? Well, our structure handles that. So why don't we can move into the next one, Dave, to where we really fit in is we're a non-regulated finance company. So we are very different because one, we're not regulated. Banks are regulated not to lend money, by the way. They're regulated to not lose depositors' money. And that's who they are chartered to protect, the depositor. We have our own funds. We're not dependent on depositors. So we are funding our own deals ourselves. And that's what part of what makes us different. We are great for fast growing companies. We're focused on providing capital to this segment that won't qualify for the bank financing. And our typical funding is against those soft assets like receivables and accrued revenue, which isn't even yet a receivable, and new contract awards. How do we do that? We do it by being focused on that asset as opposed to historical financials, because those aren't telling for new contracts.
And the asset for everybody is what?
The asset is really the new contract award and the work that you're going to be performing. In fact, it's not even really an existing asset. It's part of the forward looking, because it's new work that you're going to be performing going forward. We help manage it. We do have a lockbox that controls collections on the receipts of those, and that's how we're able to be more expansive, I guess, than banks and provide a higher capacity. It helps us look beyond what issues that banks would see as problems. Losses, limited operating history, customer concentrations. You have one customer, the US government. Banks don't like it because it's a concentration. Things like liens, startup losses, high growth. All of those are problems for traditional bank lenders, but using our asset-based focus, we're able to look past that and fund into all those situations. Our structures sorry, one last point, thank you, is our structures have much more flexibility. We typically have no financial covenants and much lighter financial reporting. We won't require audited financial statements. We won't require reviewed financial statements. We don't require that you make money every month or quarterly or annually, because we're based on the assets and the contract work that we're funding against.
And the asset is the contract.
The contract.
That's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
And soon we're going to tell you how to get to the contract.
There you go.
There are things that are above us in terms of cost, but also get more expensive. Mezzanine debt is kind of a hybrid structure. It's like a subordinated debt, but it'll typically have equity warrants that makes it very expensive. So the yield itself may be 12 to 15% annually, but they'll also say, and we're going to get 10% of your company for a nominal dollar in addition to it. So that makes it very expensive because you're selling part of your business that's going to grow. And every time you grow and get a new contract, you're going to increase the value of your company that you just gave away for 15% interest plus 10% of your company or more. Mezzanine debt is one focused on high cash flow and high growth opportunities to make that equity piece valuable. They don't like storied credit, so losses or other things. And there's minimums, and they're very sophisticated investors. They're going to want at least $2 million outstanding. It's probably closer to $5 million, and it's very difficult to obtain. The typical mezzanine debt fund will look at hundreds of transactions every week, and they'll pick one. It is hard to get, and it does require high quality financials and other things. Credit card debt will have even a higher interest rate than mezz debt, although it won't have the equity warrants. It's typically difficult to obtain very large limits. You may be able to get us things as large as $100,000 credit card line, but you're never going to get $1 million or $2 million line that we can provide to help you really support that new contract award.
And I think every business, if you're in growth, there's times when you're stressed, right? So, and credit card debt is easy to get, but again, once you hit it, you hit it. And then if the credit card companies get a wind of what's happening, they could really put a hurting on you for being able to have credit card debt in the future.
That's right. And it is typically, you can sometimes get advances, but it's typically really reserved mostly for non-payroll related expenses, which also causes problems.
Yep.
Then, of course, there's equity, which everybody loves to talk about. It's very sexy. There's all sorts of things in the market, SPACs and equity funds and everything else. But let's not forget, equity is really expensive, and it's the most difficult to get in institutional amounts, multiple millions of dollars. You're talking about very sophisticated investors. They're going to want control. They're going to want votes, and you're giving up, potentially 40 to 51% of your company.
Even if you're only giving up less than 50%, bringing somebody in, I've been with multiple companies that have done this, and the best way that they fix the problem is buying them out.
It's a very long process to raise. It does provide a lot of flexibility because you don't have interest carry costs. You might have preferred dividends though, or even what they call non-cash PIK dividends. That's adding to kind of your debt load. And you are giving away, a voting right and part of the company. And so it is very challenging. And also, like mezz debt, we'll have institutional amounts where, you can't really effectively go out to the market unless you're looking for $5 or $10 million, unless you're looking for family and friends.
Yep.
But that's a whole nother
that's another
story.
We can talk about family and friends later and how that turns into family strife and no more friends.
It's a whole nother webinar.
That's another thing. That's a therapy session. So let's talk about what you guys do specifically for this with and how you operate, because this is unique and very cool. And Peter Timmis is disappearing.
Yeah.
Right, and remember to all the panelists, just remember
I was
all the
losing my
panelists.
power.
You're losing your power.
And if you have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat because
Yep.
we want it to be interactive. So if anything that Peter or Patrick are saying you have questions, just feel free to open the chat.
And we will get to Q&A in a little bit too. So
sure.
you let it out, and we'll do our best to answer the questions. Go ahead.
Yep.
I just want to add something to what Patrick had just reviewed. I've personally been doing this for 31 years. The biggest thing that has prevented clients from really growing their business, even clients that can acquire contracts, is lack of funding. That's the biggest thing that our clients said. A lot of our clients will say to us, geez, I wish I had known about you guys 10 years ago, or I wish I'd known about you 5 years ago. Is because what we do is we lend to that opportunity. So even if it's your first contract, you have no other business, whether it's your first contract or you're a seasoned company and you've got some volume, we're going to give you the financial funding to grow your business and grow it on getting to the leveraging of your contracts, where one contract will lead to another contract. And we automatically move your line of credit up to establish your capability to finance those contracts. The biggest thing that another clients will say is that, well, I have a line of credit at the bank, but I won this award and they won't increase my line of credit. That's not with us. We automatically move your line up. So whether you're a new company or a growing company, you should be doing business with a company like ours, because we're going to give you that financial firepower to grow your company.
Because you understand how federal contracts work.
Correct.
And you understand the payment structures that the government uses and the challenges of those payment structures, so that when you're looking at that contract, and you've done this before, Peter, where you have awarded $1 million. So you have a company that's less than $1 million gets an $8 million award as an 8A, right?
Right.
Yep.
And that doesn't scare you. That actually excites you, where a bank would lose their mind over that.
Well,
So,
where the differing point is that, and I'm sure Patrick is going to cover that, is on our unbilled, where if you're a staffing company and you work for 2 weeks and you've got a 1 week payroll delay, the big thing is, how am I gonna make payroll in the third week? Because I can't invoice the government or my prime till the beginning of the following month. Well, we will advance on that payroll summary cards so that you can make that payroll. So our clients, if they're confident enough to bid on the contracts, win the contracts, they never have to shy away from size because we'll be there, we will step up to the plate to fund those contracts.
And that's
That's why I
exactly
say to many companies out there, if you are a growing company, whether you've got no business or you currently got business, you need to at least have an initial consultation with us because it'll be the best time that you have spent. And quite honestly, you couldn't partner with a better financial firm than Action Capital and TFN. We have more experience than anybody. We get things done. We're straightforward. We have integrity, and we have a client base that loves us.
So back to the asset-based approach. Who wants to talk about this?
Yeah,
New federal contract wins?
Yeah, let me kind of start off with the asset-based approach and where does it really help? And it's really new federal contract wins is one of the biggest things, the positive thing why I think everybody is here. And it could be, we finance also subcontractors and even quite frankly, large commercial contracts. But the point is new opportunity. You've got an opportunity to double your revenue with a new contract that you're going to bill $1 million a year on. And how do you fund that payroll? And that's what the asset-based approach does, because it's going to double the size of your company and you're just not able to attract the capital or liquidity to support that without an asset-based lending approach. It's also good for any kind of service companies without hard assets, whether you have a new contract award or not, because traditional financing sources don't like service-oriented companies, whether it be just human services or even like a distributor where you're selling goods and integrating them. Traditional lending sources don't like service oriented companies. Also, if you have a limited operating history, you don't have 3 years of historical financials, or you've got 3 years of historical financials, but it shows limited revenue or maybe losses, that the asset-based approach helps us look through and get beyond those issues that would otherwise be problematic in terms of getting funding. Large customer concentrations, again, if you have a single customer that accounts for anything more than really 25 or 30% of your total business, that's considered a customer concentration and scares away access to a lot of the less expensive bank financing.
And a lot of federal contractors have 70, 80, 90%.
Yep, that's right.
Government.
And sales to government agencies.
Yep.
One of the unique things about financing government contractors is the U.S. government exempts itself from the UCC laws. Isn't that good of them? So you can't get a true security interest in a government receivable, which the government's really hurting itself in terms of, hey, they're trying to help small businesses. Yeah. And by doing that, it makes it more difficult for small businesses to get financing, as well as high financial leverage. The other thing I would put on here that we should note, although we talk about it, I think, on the next page, is if you're bidding for a contract and you need financing support, you need to be able to demonstrate that you've got the capacity to service that contract if you award it. That is the ideal asset-based lending approach. Yep. Because we're going to help you. We're going to look at that contract and say, yes, we can fund that contract and help you get to it. And we'll talk about that in a second.
Before it's awarded, you can do that review. And that's a really cool thing to be able to do. So some of the benefits, you mentioned this, Patrick, looking past the obstacles that other folks are going to, it's going to block. High growth, a lot of things happen in the federal space, right?
Yep.
And operating history, high leverage, operating losses. We don't always operate in profitability if we're companies, right? Shocking, everybody.
And it may be intentional too, right?
Sometimes
you're willing to accept losses to get to that new contract because you're investing in the business development to get it.
A loss leader, we didn't make that up.
David, we currently have a few clients that are financing with us because their banks, they doubled the size of their business with one contract award, and the banks were uncomfortable financing because they were growing their business at 100% overnight.
Yep.
And the bank asks them to find alternative lending.
They don't like it. And there's good reason for that from a bank's perspective, because of what you said, Patrick, is their job is to protect the people that have bank interest
Depositors,
and have their deposits, right?
the things that make my wife nervous every night.
That's we'll talk about that in
Put that,
another
no
therapy
deposits.
session. So, and then again, the idea here is the difference in liquidity, all the requirements, a little bit different on your side because you understand that process. And another part that you mentioned is no upfront costs, no annual costs, no fixed costs, all those very cool, as well as your quick turnaround. And I know, Peter, we've talked about this in the past. How many days sometimes can you turn this stuff around?
Well, typically it's, 4, 5, 6 business days, but we've had emergency situations in the past where a customer thought that they were getting their payroll funded with some other source. And at the last minute, 2 days before payroll, the other source had said, sorry, we cannot do this. Well, we're faxing late at night, getting things back and forth, or emailing late at night. And we've actually funded deals within 2 business days and basically saved thousands of jobs.
And a boatload of reputation.
Correct.
Because as soon as you start slipping on that, it's very hard to recover from that. So one of the things that was really important is on the front end of this, if you're looking at an opportunity, what are contracting officers looking for to make sure that you can fulfill the contract? One part is your capabilities, right? You have to be good at what you do and you have to have the capabilities. But the other part is that, so that's demonstrating you know your business. But the big one here is the financial capacity to perform on that new award. And that's where you guys concentrate, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that's what really we work to provide what we call financing support letters, which is actually a letter that we issue to the government contracting agency, or sometimes even a prime or other people, to demonstrate that we have reviewed with you the potential contract and opportunity that you're pursuing and your financials, and that we've approved you for actual financing and specific liquidity to support your performance on that contract. Because they need to know, again, that you're about to double your size with this new contract award, that you've got the capacity to carry that working capital investment for 60, maybe even 90 days.
That's right.
Before you start seeing payments on your invoices.
That is absolutely true.
As part of that, the second bullet point, as David mentioned, demonstrating your business, we're going to help you work through the model of the new contract opportunity and to make sure that you've thought through all the costs and the performance on it, and that you know what your margins are on it, and that you can actually perform it. We have certainly had a number of companies that we've worked with that gets into a new contract, but there's some unique qualities in it that it wasn't exactly what they thought, and that the financial model isn't the same. And so really working through those details so you know what you're getting into, because once you get into it, it's not so easy to just raise your hand to the government and say, hey, by the way, this isn't working for me. Can we do something about it? And so we want to make sure we're analyzing that up front.
Yep. And
Patrick,
that gets,
as I listen to you, Patrick and Peter, it's just so helpful. I've had clients before where they'll get into a contract and they don't know any of these aspects. And in addition to actually lending the financing, it sounds like you have in-depth knowledge and you're willing to share this knowledge and help people along in the process, which is really important. It sounds like you're trusted advisors in this space. That's what I'm hearing as I'm listening to your presentation.
We have a full package approach, Sally, versus just providing the financing. We do a lot of consulting on the side, and we don't charge anything for any of that. In DC, I've been in the DC market for over 30 years. And I think per capita, the DC market has got more consultants than anywhere in the world. With all of them with their hands out.
That's a fact. So lending to the opportunity pre-bid, this is what we're talking about, because it illustrates to the contracting officers that you are qualified. So part of this we'll talk about with what we do with identifying the potential lead and contract award. That's where we live, right, Peter?
Correct.
That's the ISI federal land. Now,
Right.
once we're there in the proposal process, this is the beautiful thing about what Peter and Patrick were talking about, is that they'll review that with you and say, okay, where are you? Where do you think your margins really are? And where are your financing margins? And how does that apply to how does your financing apply to the margins, right? So tell us a little bit about that, Patrick.
Yeah, as we talk about, looking at the actual model of the contract, and unfortunately, you're right, a lot of this comes from years and years of experience doing this for, 62 years now, I guess. We've had a lot of experience and have made, certainly some mistakes, but you learn from all of them. And so getting into the actual contract and making sure we understand, is it an SCA contract? What's your fringe that you have to pay for it? Is it firm fixed price? What's the billing milestones? And comparing that versus the overall billing and the financial model is a very, very key piece to it. So we can help you work through saying, well, I mean, your bid needs to be really here to support the cost. Typically, our cost is going to be on a revenue basis. It's going to be less than 1% of the cost of your revenue. So it's an interesting calculation to look at and say, as long as you have a 2% margin, you're net good by carrying the financing cost of us to get this new work, because it's going to add incremental margin to your bottom line. Obviously, you don't want to aim for a 2% margin, right?
Better not.
You guys to get a 10 or 12% margin. But it's really important that you work through that so you know what your cost is going to be.
That's exactly
so that you can incorporate that in your final bid and your final proposal, and not kind of get to that point that you got the award and now you don't know what your financing cost is going to be, and it turns out you're upside down on it.
And we've seen that. And so the biggest thing here is what you're willing to do is help them with a letter of financial support that they can include in their proposal that says, hey, we are financially strong enough to do this. And there's nothing cookie cutter about this, right, guys? You have the company and you have the opportunity. So whatever those two combinations are is what the rate, you're going to figure the rates, and you're going to figure the amounts that are available to them in financing based on those two combinations.
That's right. Because even if it looks like similar work, right? No two companies like, and no
You're
two
right.
contracts exactly like. And there's all sorts of shades of gray and things that all play into it. And so it is much more complex. And I would note, I mean, the letter of financial support is very specific, and we'll you cite down to the actual solicitation number. So I mean, it's very demonstrable that, hey, it's this specific opportunity and this specific model that we've gone through with you.
I want to bring home another point before we leave that screen, David.
Okay.
That everything that Patrick just described in bringing on board a customer, I've been doing this for 31 years. There's nobody else in the marketplace that does that. So if you really stop to think about this, here's a company, Action Capital TFN, will spend all this time with you for no upfront cost, give you the tools so that when you do bid on that contract, you've got everything covered. Most other lenders, you'll get emails every day from merchant advance companies, other lenders. There's nobody that takes the time and the effort that we put forth because we really care about you. Yeah, we get up every morning to make money, but we want to make sure that you make money, because if you make money, we're going to make money. So this is a true partnership.
It is.
This philosophy has held well for me for 31 years. I currently have clients that I originated in the early 90s and mid 90s that are doing 30, 40, $50 million worth of business that are still with us because of the approach that we take. And I also have at least a dozen companies that, because of our lending to the opportunity, have sold for millions that wouldn't have sold for millions if they hadn't onboarded with us from the beginning.
Because when you have federal contracts, it adds to your company's value.
Correct.
That's exactly right.
Yes.
So you also do lending post. So you do all the prep work, so that they can get the contract. And then when it's awarded, this is where you kick into high gear and you have the ability to turn around and do the financing, right?
Correct.
That's right.
It
And
will take, go ahead, Patrick.
yeah, I was going to say, and you just made an interesting point. We don't start making any money until this point because everything else we do, we don't charge for, and we're working for free. We only make money if you're successful, if you get a new contract and you start operating. And in fact, even then, we're not sure we're going to make money because you have to be able to perform successfully, which is why we're willing to invest on the front end.
And you have to pay them back.
So you get the award. Hey, great, congratulations. So there's more work to be done still. That includes on direct federal contracts, we follow the Assignment of Claims Act. That's all spelled out per the FAR, which is a wonderful document to read if you've got a couple thousand years. And or if it's a subcontract using a change of remittance address. Those documents go to the government, the prime, and that helps start the process of, as you invoice, payments will actually come into our lockbox service in your name, but it comes directly to us. We are SAM registered, we are D&B, we're well rated by D&B, and all that helps in the process because we've been through it. I've been through DFAS Columbus a number of times and many other payment systems. And it's also an interesting place to be if you've got some extra time you want to just burn.
The federal government is an interesting place anyway. Anybody that's on this call should get their head examined first. But now that you know that you're here.
As you start work, there's a couple pieces. So one, there's the direct advances, kind of a borrowing-based approach against receivables, billed invoices. But also, we advance on accrued revenue, earned but unbilled when required, because for some reason, employees like to get paid every 2 weeks.
No.
If you're in your first month of your contract and you haven't even gotten to an invoice yet, a lot of your employees are going to ask for a paycheck and want to take that money home with them. And so we help get you there by providing earned and unbilled and receivables-based advances at an advance rate of 85 to 90% as a general rule. Sometimes it's even higher, to help you fund those expenses before you can invoice. And then when that invoice comes in, it pays back down the advances. This
is one of the things Karen from Amalgamated Services asked this. Is this a factoring receivables tool?
No, we're actually an asset-based lender. So we're not factoring. Factoring, at least traditionally, is really the outright sale of a receivable, which one, you can't really sell a government receivable, by the way. But two, that kind of changes the relationship. If you factor, that company then that bought the receivable, their sole focus is, I want to get this paid as quickly as possible, because typically a factoring relationship is you sell the invoice at a discount. And if you sell it at a 3% discount, well, it's an interesting interest rate if that invoice pays in 60 days. It's a very different interest rate if it pays in 3 days. And so there's a kind of a differing relationship in factoring. We're actually funding. We're a secured lender, and we're funding against accrued revenue and billed receivables. And as a result, it's much less expensive than factoring.
Yeah, factoring.
And two, it's a different relationship because our goal isn't to go beat on your customer, the payer, to say, pay that invoice, pay that invoice, pay that invoice. We're here to help you. And it's completely transparent with our model. You know exactly what your interest rate is, exactly what your cost is. Whereas if you're selling an invoice at a discount, you don't know what your real cost is until you know how quickly that invoice paid.
That's right.
I think the key to what you just said was that we're developing a relationship with a client, with giving them all these consulting services. With a factor, that's not a relationship. They're just buying your invoices, sending cash out the door. Whether you survive, you survive. If you don't survive, you don't survive. We truly have your interest at heart. You know, we're going to do all this consulting. We have a lot of customers that are going to be a sub to a prime. They'll call us and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing business with XYZ company. Could you run a Dun & Bradstreet on that company to see if I'm secure, am I going to get paid? Should I do work? And Patrick has touched a little bit on that prior, but there's a whole total relationship to this that factoring companies And quite frankly, we're a minimum of 50% less, if not more, than what a factor would
Mhm.
charge.
Because you understand this world and you understand contracting as it works. So let's wait, good grief, what is up with my system? I got to be able to see what I'm here today because okay, I'm gonna run up here.
So while he's figuring
While
that
you're
out,
trying to
if
do
there's
that,
any,
go ahead and answer ask some questions.
feel free. So you can go to the Q&A and post questions in the Q&A, or you can go to your chat. So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, all of you see the chat. Feel free to click on chat, and then all panelists and attendees and William, Peter, and Patrick will answer
we
your
go.
questions. Here we go. Good job, Dave.
So what? Yeah, not from my. I got all kind of Zoom challenges today. My apologies, guys. So, what type of contracts are you interested in? Products, services, or staffing? So there you go. And I know services and staffing kind of runs together, but pick what you like. You can choose as many as you want, by the way. So go ahead and let us know about that. And what are the questions there, Sally?
So
I got a couple from here if you want it. In fact, I have one from right here from Charles. It says,
right.
have you worked with staffing agencies before? And have you seen them thrive better utilizing your assistance? Please let me know how you all can seriously help me make my first million and million plus in staffing employment revenue.
Yep.
Thank you.
Well, staffing is a big part of our business. We have many staffing companies. Personally, in my 31 years, I've had a couple staffing companies because of our lending to the opportunity have sold their companies for millions. And the key here is our unbilled, where people work, but you haven't invoiced yet, and you've got a payroll to make. We will advance on time cards. So if you can handle the business, you're qualified to acquire that business, the sky's the limit, because we're going to fund whether it's 100 positions or 300 positions. And this is where we come back to leveraging your contracts, using the financial support letters to grow. Because if you've got a banking relationship, try to get a financial support letter. If you've got a $500,000 line of credit with a bank, try to get a support letter on a $10 million contract award from your bank. It's not going to happen.
Nope.
With us, we're going to give you that support letter to grow your business, leveraging your financial support letters and leveraging your contracts into growing that company. And staffing is a great opportunity where we have many customers that we help grow.
So I got a couple questions here. Could using these alternative means of financing put a negative connotation on my company WRT, effective financial management?
Patrick?
Yeah. And I see the question also, are there options available for state local contracts? The answer to that is yes, there's absolutely, I'm going to start at the bottom. There are absolutely, we also fund state local contracts, municipal contracts, and even non-federal contracts. So we finance all of them. The big thing we're looking for is that the end payer is a credit qualified customer and that we can understand the legal billing relationship between you and whoever your end customer is. No, in fact, I would say using alternative means of financing doesn't put a negative connotation on your company. In fact, what we're doing is we're helping you get a very positive, not only connotation, actual, what's the word I'm looking for? Data point, reference, by helping you get financing support letters. We are a recognized finance company. We finance thousands of businesses across the United States. We are lending like anything else. And so the more that you could demonstrate you've got access to capital, the better it is. There is a common misconception. A lot of people think, hey, to establish credit, I've got to have a bank line. And nothing could be further from the truth. There's nothing different about getting a bank line and establishing credit and getting credit with us. Either one gives you capacity, except we're going to give you more capacity. Or we may give you capacity and the bank won't give you any at all, especially important when you're just starting, when you're growing, when you've got a lot of opportunities that the banks won't meet.
And Sonia was also asking, does this also apply to state and local contracts.
Right. And yes, absolutely. We'll fund state contracts, local contracts, municipal contracts, subcontracts, first tier, even second tier subcontracts. They're all very similarly analyzed by us, and we fund all of them.
Marquetta asked, when is the best time for a startup that hasn't been awarded a contract yet to apply for funding?
Now.
Now.
when you're pursuing, I mean, you have to have your plan far enough along and some identified the avenues. What's your skill set? Where is it you're best suited? What are you going to pursue? And what makes you qualified to win those type of contracts, so that we can help you, and probably Dave can help you, to identify, where do I go to find this new business? And you've got to have that part together before you start really pursuing contracts. You've got to have a strategy, and you got to know where you're good. And then as you're starting to pursue them, we can help kind of pre-qualify you, get to know you, so that when you find a real live opportunity, you can then move quickly and say, hey, here's an opportunity I'm going to pursue, and here's why I think I can win it.
Yep. And there's a lot involved in that. And you just mentioned something that set me up really good, Patrick. Thank you very much. So when you're pushing out to the market, one of the pieces that you want to be is procurement ready. And if you're brand new to this space, this doesn't operate like anything you've ever seen before. And there's a reason why. It churns people, right? It churns companies. So there's a great document that the VA's put out. It's the procurement readiness document. I put it in there, and there's a lot of great information. It's not 100% from my perspective, but it's really, really close. All the advice that's in there is very, very good. The biggest thing that you need to do, and Patrick mentioned this, is identifying your market, finding the decision makers that are responsible for what you buy, and then engaging those folks so that you can differentiate your company and use your letter of financial support as leverage to say, hey, we are different. We have the capacity to be able to do this. Here's my proof. These guys are willing to put money behind me in reference to this particular contract and the relationships that they built. That is valuable in the mind of the contracting officer. Why? Because contracting officers are risk averse. They don't like new things, and they don't like change. And guess what you are if you're brand new? You're new. They don't want to change from what they know, and you're risky because you don't understand their world. So by being able to market properly, using the tools that you have, your capabilities, your capacity to be able to do the work that you are very good at doing. And then you have the financial support letter to say, hey, I not only can do this, but I know that there's going to be bumps in the road, especially if you're new to federal contracting. Are there going to be bumps in the road? Everybody hear me.
Yes.
Bumps in the road are coming. You can't not have bumps in the road. So this is a way to be able to solidify and make sure that you can manage through those bumps in the road, because you don't want to get a bump in the road and not be able to pay payroll. And all of a sudden that gets back to the contracting officer, big problems.
And there are a lot of contracting officers that everything else you put down on paper all looks good, but they look at your company and you haven't demonstrated financial support, and they're really going to disqualify you out of hand. And you may never know it.
And they're looking for ways to disqualify you out of hand. Guess what? They're looking for it. If you think it's fair and everything's great and all the competition and they want everybody in there, no, they want to figure out how to get you out of the pool as fast as possible. You need to prove that you belong in the pool. Secondly, you need to prove that you can cover when you're in the pool. And that's what the financial support letter is.
So I think just adding to what Dave and Patrick and Peter said, there's an entire ecosystem of doing business with the federal government. And what Patrick and Peter are providing is part of that ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And what Dave said is it's important to have a good website, your CAPE statement, be on sam.beta.gov. So there's all these elements that ISI understands, and to get you sort of ready, to get you kind of Patrick and Peter ready for your funding. And
to your point, being ready, So you don't want to go out until you look like you belong. And then when you go out, you're going to go out like you belong. And then you're going to give them proof that you belong, which is what you can leverage your financial support letter to be. And when Patrick and Peter were talking about this, when we first started talking, I said, so what does it take to get a financial support letter? And I said, we need to talk to them. We need to understand what they're doing and the types of contracts they're interested in. But then as soon as they understand you and understand what you're after, they can give you this letter, which will increase your win rate because it gives the comfort level to the contracting officer. Remember, they're risk averse. They don't like new things. Both of you are both of those. You're both of those.
There's a couple questions in the chat. There's a couple questions. Hello all, I'm an SDVWOSB. New to the government contracting, I would love to talk to others about teaming or assisting administratively on their pending or current contracts.
Yeah, there you go. And that's Marquetta. Marquetta, make sure you share your information so people know how to get in touch.
Put your name in the chat, put your information in the chat, your LinkedIn, and this is a really good opportunity. There's quite a few people here that you can link in and connect with, including Peter and Patrick.
So so as we're finishing up, here's the deal. You want the letter of support so that and because they look at it to lending on the opportunity as opposed to lending on the award or financing or even factoring on an award that we've talked about. We're talking about a receivables line of credit based on the asset, and the asset being the opportunity that you win that turns into a contract. Banks are not going to do that. They just don't do that. Their heads explode. They can't possibly think that way. And this is the beautiful thing about understanding this world and helping folks within this space. So I appreciate you guys with that. So now we're going to ask this final poll, I think, that I got a launch from a different place apparently, because it's not going to work. So what would be beneficial for you as a result of this conversation? Do you need help with a specific lending opportunity? You can pick as many as you want, by the way. A financial support letter. Do you need a financial support letter? Everybody should answer that. Just saying. Demonstrating financial capacity, your readiness for being in there. Analyzing my company for pre-bid financing, funding payroll. And what about mobilization costs and contract startup costs? All these are ways that you can leverage what you have as an asset in a contract or something else. Please contact me. And then we're going to get to the final questions that you guys have. What else we got there, Sally?
So basically we have thank you. This is good stuff. Looking good. On the Q&A we have.
How does DMB, David Scott says, how does DMB factor in the contract decisions? We do not pay for them for enhanced services. How does the basic DMB profile contrast with financial support letter on Action Capital provide? Action Capital is going to be specific to an opportunity, right?
Correct.
I'm answering for you because I'm learning as I go. And then additionally, DNB is a separate entity. It's not the government, although they're using DNB. That is changing, ladies and gentlemen, to a SAMI record, and it won't be long. And DNB is not even going to be in the equation. So you can answer the question if you know about DNB and how that contrasts it. I don't think they're even close to the same to me.
No, they really aren't. And it's interesting because we also are looking at DNB and other things for our customers. A lot of times it's, not that they're just bidding on a new contract. They got, 4 other ones and 2 are subcontractors, and we're helping them look at, hey, where do you have trade exposure? And a lot of times DNB will say, hey, this company is, they look good. We recommend you grant them up to a $30,000 limit. And we're saying, no, we'll give them a $3 million line to go pursue this new contract that's not reflected in their historical financials or their historical payment trends or anything else, because we're funding the opportunity.
It can't be reflected.
Historical.
It can't be reflected in your historical because you haven't won it yet.
That's right. And we're helping you win it.
That's exactly right. And it's a different perspective. It's just, oh man, it's awesome. So anyway, I'm going to end this poll. There's several things that we'll be following up with. Whoever kicked anything in there, we'll make sure you get that. And we also want to get to a place for you got the handouts. Everybody got the handouts. I reposted them so that you have them. You will get a recap email with the session video, as well as all the documents and a link that you can just click and say, hey, I want to meet with these guys. And that's what's going to happen. If you need additional professional resources, including your letter of financial support or procurement readiness assistance or federal marketing, those things we can talk about. If that's what you need, just let us know and we'll be glad to help you with those for those pieces. And otherwise, we just want to say welcome. Thanks. Thanks for joining us today and spending this hour with us. I'm hoping that you all learned things. I know I did, and I've been around this for a long time. And what I love is that folks, they understand the federal space and they understand the value of the opportunity to you and the contract award to you, and want to make sure that you win and then can finance it. It's not complicated.
And if anybody needs to save the chat, there's 3 little dots at the bottom of your Zoom, and you can save the chat that has all the links, etc.
All right. Sonia says, looking forward to working with you. We're on the GSA schedule. So there's
Yay.
potential for lots of projects. Love it, Sonia. From Save.
Marguerite
Services
Harris from Phoenix Group, areas of interest, administration, assistance, construction, transportation, which I know we have a gov brief on. So.
That's right. We just
Yay.
did that. So there you go. So if you need anything else, here we are. Reach out. We'll be glad to help. Right, guys?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Patrick, Peter, awesome information. We appreciate it very much. Different perspective. And I think we met several of the requirements for new funding resources that folks did not know existed. So we really appreciate you guys. Appreciate what you do for all of my clients and all the folks that you do in the federal space, especially the 8As. You've been doing that for so long. It's now 16As.
Right.
So, awesome.
We enjoyed this.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
We appreciate it, guys. Have a great rest of the week. We will see you next time.